Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere more painful than stepping on a Lego barefoot at 2 in the morning. The deranged, corset-crushing world of Victorian beauty standards. This wasn't about looking nice. This was about squeezing, starving, and smearing yourself into a vision of fragile, fainting femininity, while possibly losing a rib or two along the way. Beauty in the 1800s meant lead on your face, whalebones in your underwear, and a commitment to suffering that would put modern marathon runners to shame. So before you lie back and pretend your mattress is made of horsehair and your duvet smells faintly of coal smoke, go ahead and subscribe, but only if you enjoy historical suffering delivered in a soothing tone. And leave a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that faint Victorian breeze, or just imagine the smell of a damp drawing room mixed with opium and faint disappointment. Let's pause for a moment. What's it like to have your intestines gently rearranged by fashion? Why was tuberculosis considered sexy? And how did anyone stay alive long enough to attend a second garden party? Considering the arsenic-laced face powder, flammable hairstyles, and a daily diet that consisted of dry toast, weak tea, and repression? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1875. The height of Victorian England, where beauty was pain, fainting was a lifestyle. And if you weren't dizzy, pale, and perpetually at risk of spontaneous combustion, you simply weren't trying hard enough. Good luck. It's dawn, and the maid is banging on your door because you've overslept. Again. You're cocooned in starched linen sheets, weighed down by 3 blankets, and at least 1 decorative antimacassar. The air is brisk. Your hair's already flattening in fear. And today you must be beautiful. Or else. You blink awake, momentarily paralyzed by a combination of cold air, oppressive bedding, and the realization that you are, in fact, late for your first appearance of the day. Your bedroom is a portrait of Victorian aspiration. Heavy velvet curtains, a marble, topped washstand, 3 mysterious porcelain dolls watching from the mantel, and enough floral wallpaper to induce hallucinations if you stare too long. The 4-poster bed creaks dramatically as you shift, announcing to the entire household that you are once again resisting the tyranny of early morning. Outside, you hear the familiar soundtrack of upper-class Victorian life. Clattering horse hooves, the distant shriek of a coal cart's wheels, and your father clearing his throat like a foghorn 2 floors down. No pressure. But your family's entire reputation is now gently prodding you out of bed. Meanwhile, your internal monologue is running through today's schedule. Breakfast, hairdressing, corseting, public fainting, afternoon tea, and not tripping over your own hem before 10 a.m. It's basically the 1800s version of checking your Google Calendar, except every notification is delivered by a person who can judge you in real time. Your first real challenge, the act of escape. Climbing out of a Victorian bed is no small feat. You're not just fighting the gravitational pull of 3 layers of blankets and 2 decorative pillows that serve no known function. You're also untangling yourself from a nightgown that has more buttons than a modern keyboard. The sheets are crisp, scratchy, and infused with the subtle aroma of lavender, starch, and the faintest whiff of centuries-old dust. You attempt a dignified roll toward the edge, but instead you thud onto the plush rug with all the grace of a fainting goat. Now upright, you're immediately assaulted by the temperature. In a Victorian home, central heating is just a rumour, and insulation is something reserved for the more privileged mice living in the walls. Your breath fogs in the morning light, and you wonder if Queen Victoria herself ever considered inventing flannel pyjamas. The washstand awaits, featuring an icy pitcher of yesterday's water and a bowl that's been optimistically labelled for your comfort. You splash your face with water cold enough to resurrect the dead, and suddenly, you're wide awake. Congratulations, you've completed your first feat of Victorian endurance. Next comes the mirror, your greatest adversary. You squint at your own reflection in the slightly warped glass, praying for minimal facial swelling and no mysterious overnight blemishes. Victorian beauty standards demand a pale, unsullied complexion, a look only achievable by never going outside and possibly being part ghost. Unfortunately, you have inherited your mother's cheeks and your uncle's tendency toward eye bags. Today, you will try to look consumptive, but in a romantic way. The maid has entered without knocking, as is tradition. She lays out your clothes in a process so ceremonial you'd think you were being knighted rather than dressed. She offers you your slippers, which are soft in theory but designed, in practice, to be slightly too small for human feet. Your day officially begins as she draws back the curtains with a flourish, unleashing an Arctic draft and 1,000 specks of dust into the room. Light floods in, illuminating your to-do list. Survive breakfast, conquer the corset, and, above all, look impossibly perfect while doing absolutely nothing. You take a deep breath. Well, as deep as you'll be allowed for the rest of the day, and brace yourself for the onslaught of expectations, petticoats, and possibly arsenic face powder. Welcome to Victorian England, where even getting out of bed is an Olympic event, and simply existing is a full-time, full-costume job. Welcome to your daily game of how many ribs can we ignore. The corset sits ominously on your dressing table, ready to transform your torso into a fashionable hourglass, with bonus dizziness and internal organ rearrangement. Take a deep breath. Actually, don't. Your day truly begins not with a stretch, but with negotiation. There it is, the corset, staring at you with 20 feet of laces and the quiet confidence of an inanimate object that absolutely knows it will win. Victorian fashion says your waist should resemble a wasp's, minus the personal space and stinging capabilities. Sigh, but not too deeply. Even your lungs need to learn restraint. The ritual begins. You raise your arms and try to stay relaxed, like a very nervous scarecrow. Your maid, who could moonlight as a competitive tug-of-war champion, begins threading the laces through a series of eyelets that seem to multiply every morning. There's an art to this, a slow tightening, then a pause for you to catch your breath, which is a charming euphemism for avoid fainting before lunch. The laces pull tighter. You wonder if this is what a tube of toothpaste feels like as it's being squeezed for the last bit. Your ribs protest. Your stomach tucks in. Your spine straightens by force. And your internal organs begin to rethink their living arrangements. The medical textbooks of the era claim this is good for your constitution. Modern medicine calls it squishing everything that shouldn't be squished. Either way, you now possess the famous hourglass silhouette, provided you remain perfectly upright, walk at half speed, and avoid sudden laughter. If you're lucky, your corset fits well and was not handed down from a great-aunt with the ribcage of a sparrow. If you're less lucky, it pinches in creative places and has a mysterious stain no one will discuss. Some days, it's worn under 3 layers of petticoats, and a bustle so large it might require planning permission. Forget bathroom breaks. Those are now a high-stakes logistical operation, requiring a small support team and a running start. As you're being laced in, your mind wanders to the long list of Victorian corset horror stories whispered in the drawing room. There's always someone's cousin who fainted at the opera, someone else who suffered a displaced liver at the picnic, and at least one poor soul whose corset snapped and nearly took out a visiting bishop. This is all part of the mystique. Swooning, you see, is not just a possibility, it's practically encouraged. Smelling salts are kept close, and if you're especially dramatic, you might practice your feint for maximum garden party effect. No shame in collapsing gracefully. It's half social ritual, half medical necessity. Once secured, you stand taller, mostly because you have no other choice. You glide across the floor, but every movement is calculated. Sitting? Only on the edge of a chair, back perfectly straight. Slouching is not just bad manners, it's physically impossible. Dropping something on the floor becomes a philosophical debate. Is it worth picking up? Or has that handkerchief now passed on to the next world? Breathing is a delicate art. Deep breaths are out. You take small, elegant sips of air, the kind that make you look slightly mysterious and always on the verge of a dramatic revelation. If you laugh, make sure it's a dignified titter. No hearty guffaws. unless you enjoy the sensation of your ribs playing percussion with your pancreas. As you peer at your reflection, you admire the transformation. Your waist looks impossibly small, your posture regal, and your entire digestive tract is temporarily out of service. Fashion is pain, yes, but it's also prestige. The tighter your corset, the higher your social standing, at least until dinner, when you'll be forced to choose between a full plate or your last remaining lung. So there you are, bound, bolstered, and beautiful by Victorian standards, ready to face the day, even if your organs aren't speaking to you. Just remember, if you feel faint, collapse artistically. If you can still breathe, you're not doing it right. Welcome to the era where looking good truly is a matter of life, death, and strategic shallow breathing. Before breakfast, it's time for the ritual. Chemise, bloomers, petticoats, stockings, corset, corset cover, crinoline, bustle, skirt, bodice, overskirt, jacket, gloves, and finally, hope. You'll be so weighed down you'll burn more calories walking to the window than most people do at the gym. Your day isn't measured in hours, but in layers. Forget minimalist wardrobes. Victorian dressing is maximalist performance art. The process begins before the sun is fully up, usually with you shivering in your nightgown as the maid lays out a small mountain of clothing on every available surface. Each item has a prescribed order, a unique method of fastening, and a particular way it must sit to avoid accidental social disaster. Miss a step, and you risk turning up to tea looking like a confused scarecrow in a taffeta tornado. The chemise is first, a thin cotton shift that's meant to protect your skin from everything that's about to happen to it. Next come the bloomers, voluminous, puffy, and guaranteed to make you feel like you're hiding an entire flock of geese. Modesty is key. Even your undergarments have undergarments. The stockings are rolled up and gartered, usually just tight enough to cut off circulation but never tight enough to actually stay up. It's a warm-up act for the main event. The corset, fresh from its own separate nightmare, makes a dramatic entrance, pinning your waist into a mathematically impossible shape. This is followed by the corset cover, because heaven forbid anyone glimpses a hint of the structural engineering keeping you upright. Next up, the petticoats, at least 2, often 3 or 4, layered to achieve the correct level of "will this person topple in a light breeze?" effect. Each one adds a new degree of insulation and a fresh opportunity for static electricity. By now, you resemble a very determined onion. But wait, there's more. The crinoline arrives, an understructure made of steel hoops and pure spite. This gives your skirt the required circumference to block doorways, threaten small children, and occasionally serve as temporary storage for lost pets. The bustle is next, a padded roll designed to give your backside the dramatic silhouette of a startled peacock. This is secured with ties, pins, and a silent prayer. Layer upon layer, you soldier on. The main skirt is draped and fastened, followed by the bodice, laced, hooked, or buttoned, so tight you suspect you're being gently embalmed. The overskirt is artistically arranged and pinned to achieve a carefully casual waterfall effect that took your maid a decade to master. The jacket completes the look, stiff with boning and trim. By this point, you've used up every ounce of personal dignity and most of your upper body strength. Gloves, of course. No respectable Victorian lady would expose her bare hands to the world, so you struggle into delicate, too tight gloves with all the determination of someone trying to wrangle a toddler into tights. If it's winter, add a cape. If it's summer, add a parasol, because now you have the dexterity of an oven mitt and can't risk the sun's deadly rays. Finally, accessories, a brooch, a locket, a hat weighed down with artificial fruit, and a pair of shoes that look charming but were designed by someone who thought feet were an urban myth. Every item has its own purpose, its own moment to shine, and its own unique way to make movement as difficult as possible. You are now technically dressed. You attempt a dignified walk to the mirror, but find you can only manage a slow, deliberate shuffle, arms stiffly at your sides to avoid knocking over candlesticks or relatives. Sitting is a process involving careful calculations, strategic pivoting, and the hope that your skirt will not swallow the furniture whole. Bending over is no longer an option. If you drop something, simply say goodbye. As you gaze at your reflection, you admire the craftsmanship, the color, the commitment to the bit. You also make a note to drink water before getting dressed tomorrow, since bathroom visits now require an hour, a friend, and the blessings of the patron saint of patience. Welcome to the world of Victorian fashion, where modesty and grandeur reign. Your muscles are always sore, and true style is measured in cubic feet of fabric. In Victorian England, the only acceptable tan was a tea stain on your gloves. Your skin must be ghostly pale, ideally with a bluish tinge. The paler you are, the less likely you are to be accused of honest labor or, worse, outdoor exercise. Sunshine? That's for gardeners and people with suspiciously healthy complexions. You, on the other hand, are aiming for the Victorian Gothic ghost, aesthetic, elegant, ethereal, and ever so slightly unwell. Each morning begins with a check in the mirror. If you can't see at least 3 veins on the back of your hand, it's time to up your game. Any suggestion of warmth in your skin tone must be neutralized immediately. Ideally, strangers should be able to mistake you for an antique porcelain doll, or, on a bad day, a decorative urn. The logic is simple but brutal. Tanned skin means you spend time outdoors, which implies actual work, possibly even sweating, a fate worse than social death. Pale skin, on the other hand, shouts to the world that you are refined, untouched by sunlight, and, let's be honest, probably a little vitamin D deficient. It's not about looking healthy, it's about looking interesting, fragile, and as though you might faint at the suggestion of manual labor. To achieve this look, you'll need an arsenal of weapons, powders, creams, washes, and the occasional complexion wafer laced with ingredients so toxic even your doctor, whose treatment options include leeches and whiskey, might raise an eyebrow. Lead powder is a fan favorite, smooth, matte, and just the right side of deadly. Mix in a little vinegar for a natural finish, and, if you're feeling bold, dab a bit of belladonna near your eyes to make them glassy and enormous. If anyone asks, yes, you really are just naturally that luminous. Please ignore the coughing. Preparation is everything. Avoid the sun like it's the tax collector. Parasols are your best friends, carried everywhere, opened at the faintest suggestion of light, and wielded with all the determination of a vampire fending off garlic. Wide-brimmed hats add extra protection and can double as a handy shield in the event of an unexpected invitation to a picnic. If a sunbeam dares to touch your cheek, consider immediate retreat indoors and a brisk application of powder. If you're caught without your hat, you have roughly 3 seconds before being mistaken for a milkmaid and possibly drafted into weeding duty. Fashion magazines of the era are full of helpful hints. Wash with rose water, dab with cucumber juice, avoid strong wind, and, under no circumstances, laugh outdoors. Smiling in direct sunlight could trigger a flush of color, which would undo hours of careful preparation and possibly get you written out of your uncle's will. If you find your cheeks naturally rosy, you can always counteract them with a layer of cold cream and a dusting of rice powder. If that fails, a well-placed lace veil can hide a multitude of sins and at least half of your face. Men aren't entirely off the hook, either. The well-bred Victorian gentleman should be nearly as pale as his fainting wife. Any hint of a sunburn is met with polite horror and the quiet suggestion that perhaps you spent too much time with the horses. If you're unlucky enough to develop freckles, expect to be subjected to a barrage of home remedies, ranging from lemon juice to, unfortunately, bleach. At social gatherings, compliments are doled out with surgical precision. "You look so pale" is the highest praise. "You seem well" is a veiled accusation. A good day is when the neighbors ask if you're feeling all right and if you'd like a glass of water. The gold standard is to be so pale that you're mistaken for a minor ghost haunting the parlor, but still glamorous enough that no one offers you soup. So, you keep to the shadows, layer on the powder, and remind yourself, in Victorian England, being the picture of health is terribly gauche, looking like you stepped straight out of an Edgar Allan Poe story. Now that's society's dream. The pursuit of flawless skin requires dedication and a willingness to slap pure poison on your face. Creams, powders, and lotions are packed with things your dermatologist would consider attempted murder. But hey, your cheeks are radiant. In Victorian England, the quest for beauty is nothing short of chemical warfare. Your dressing table resembles a mad scientist's laboratory, with jars, bottles, and pots labelled in elaborate calligraphy, each containing substances that, in any other context, would require a hazmat team, but all in the name of a creamy complexion. If it can bleach, burn, or slightly numb the skin, it's in this morning's regimen. You begin with the classics, Venetian ceruse, a charming blend of lead and vinegar. The directions are simple. Slather it on your face, leave it until you feel a light tingling, or numbness, and then finish with a dusting of rice powder for that perfect, recently exhumed, but wealthy look. Lead-based face paint is a generational favorite, passed down from mother to daughter, along with the family pearls and a slightly wobbly immune system. If you want to take things to the next level, why not try a little arsenic? Arsenic complexion wafers are all the rage, promising skin so luminous it practically glows in the dark. Simply dissolve one on your tongue and wait for that telltale feeling of, what have I done? Modern beauty supplements have nothing on this. You're not just risking breakouts, you're flirting with a lifetime membership in the Victorian Poisoning Club. Mercury is your secret weapon for stubborn spots and pimples. Applied in tiny dabs, it promises to purify your skin and banish imperfections, though it has the side effect of banishing your sanity and possibly your future. Mercury cream is particularly prized for producing that slightly feverish flush so admired at afternoon teas. Why look healthy when you can look deliriously beautiful? The best part? None of these concoctions smell pleasant. Most creams are scented with heavy floral oils to mask the underlying aroma of death and despair. Your morning routine is a sensory assault. Lead, vinegar, rosewater, arsenic, and a delicate undertone of existential dread. It's less spa day, more industrial accident. Beauty manuals of the time are full of advice, each more unhinged than the last. If your skin starts to flake, it's just a sign the product is working. Numbness is good. Faintness is a compliment. And if you notice a metallic taste in your mouth, simply chase it with a glass of sherry and carry on. After all, what's a little nervous system damage in pursuit of radiance? And it's not just your face. Victorians are equal opportunity risk takers. Arsenic drops for the eyes, belladonna to dilate the pupils and blur your vision, carbolic acid for fading freckles, and ammonia baths for refreshing the complexion. If you happen to pass out, your family will gently revive you with smelling salts, then reapply your powder for the next round of visitors. Modern readers may gasp, but these practices are completely normal for your time. Your friends compete to see whose cheeks are smoothest, whose pallor is most haunting, whose eyebrows have faded into non-existence thanks to repeated exposure to eyebrow water, a home brew of ammonia, alcohol, and hope. When someone asks what your secret is, you simply smile, pray that your teeth don't ache from the mercury fumes, and whisper, I owe it all to science. At the end of the day, your skin glows, your cheeks are impossibly smooth, and you've survived another round of Victorian beauty roulette. Never mind the headaches, the strange rashes, or the growing suspicion that you're being slowly embalmed. In the world of 19th century cosmetics, perfection is worth a little poison. After all, if your glow can be seen from across a candlelit ballroom, what's a little arsenic among friends? It's the 1870s, and full brows are out. You must pluck, shave, or just will them out of existence. If anyone asks why you look surprised all the time, just blame the aesthetic. Victorian beauty is all about the soft, delicate, and faintly ghostly. Eyebrows? Too bold, too expressive, too alive. So, each morning, you approach the mirror armed with tweezers, a razor, and the steely resolve of someone about to commit tiny acts of personal sabotage for the sake of fashion. The standard is simple. The less brow, the better. Thick, dark, and natural arches are the signature of a milkmaid, an actress, or worst of all, someone with opinions. You, on the other hand, are going for emotionless cherub caught in a draft. The goal is to have just enough brow left to hint that you once had eyebrows, perhaps as a child, but bravely outgrew them. If you're not sure where to stop, keep going until your forehead has more real estate than a London landlord. Let's talk technique. Plucking is the most common method, a process that can only be described as medieval self-torture in the name of subtlety. If you're feeling extra daring, there's shaving, but only with the kind of razor your brother uses to narrowly avoid self-decapitation every morning. Shaving is fast, but also risky. One slip, and you've invented a whole new eyebrow trend that's 2 decades ahead of its time. There's always the truly committed few who use bleach or lemon juice to lighten any lingering hairs, achieving the perfect shade of almost invisible. The effects are dramatic. You now appear permanently startled, mildly concerned, or as though you've just heard an unexpected bit of gossip in the drawing room. People say the eyes are the window to the soul, but Victorian England has decided the best windows are unframed. You walk into a party and it's impossible to tell if you're shocked by the wallpaper or if you're simply very fashion-forward. Magazines are filled with eyebrow tips, mostly warnings. Don't let your brows get unruly, or worse, expressive. If you must pencil in a faint arch, make it so subtle that only the most determined suitor with a magnifying glass will notice. The colour should be lighter than your hair, paler than your skin, and applied with the light touch of a nervous squirrel. Any hint of boldness could see you banned from the sewing circle or, even worse, written about in someone's diary. And it's not just about looks. There's a moral angle too. Thick brows are linked to unruliness and wildness. The ideal Victorian woman is gentle, pure, and, if possible, looks like she's just seen a minor ghost. No one wants to be accused of harbouring thoughts or, heaven forbid, ambitions. In polite company, your brows should be as unobtrusive as your political opinions. But don't worry, men are under pressure too. A gentleman's brows must be tidy, faint, and never distract from his impressively waxed moustache. A bushy brow is a sign of excessive vigour, possibly revolutionary thinking, or being French. All risky business in the land of stiff upper lips and carefully muted emotions. If you miss your old brows, you're not alone. Every so often, you might spot a faded portrait of an ancestor with proud, assertive eyebrows and feel a pang of envy. How did they survive such scandalous arches? It's best not to dwell. Instead, focus on perfecting your look, a study in delicate self-erasure and practiced innocence. If you must, sigh gently at your reflection and tell yourself it's all for the greater good. So you pat on a little extra powder, avoid sudden expressions, and float serenely through your day, browless and bold in your own quietly anxious way. Victorian beauty isn't about standing out. It's about blending in, one carefully erased eyebrow at a time. And remember, if you ever want to know how you're really feeling, you'll just have to ask your maid, because your face is no longer giving anything away. Hair is everything. Big, shiny, intricate, and dangerously flammable. You'll spend hours with hot irons, pomades, and pins, and then pray you don't stand too close to a gas lamp. Many hairstyles are a game of will it combust? Victorian hair isn't just a statement, it's a full-scale engineering project. Your day begins not with a yawn, but with a planning meeting, your own head as the blueprint, and the maid as the world-weary contractor who's already wondering how many hairpins she'll step on today. You're not just doing your hair, you're constructing a social status. The higher, glossier, and more gravity-defying, the better. The dream. To look like you've just returned from a wind tunnel, but with elegance. First comes the wash, a rare event due to the risk of pneumonia, public scandal, and general inconvenience. Most days, you'll be dealing with yesterday's style, refreshed with a dash of lavender water, pomade, and the firm hope that no one gets too close. Victorian pomades are concoctions of bear fat, beef marrow, and wax, all blended together to keep those elaborate curls in place. If you run out, bacon grease will do in a pinch. Your hair will shine and possibly attract hungry terriers. Now, for the styling. Hot irons are heated over the fire, or, if you're fancy, a gas lamp. Each curl is wrapped with trembling hands as you try to achieve perfect ringlets without actually melting off your fringe. The smell of singed hair drifts through the house, a comforting sign of progress and a warning that you are now, technically, a fire hazard. Braids, twists, and buns are all popular, provided they're constructed with at least a pound of hidden padding and a minimum of 30 hairpins. The more architectural, the better. There are stories of women who manage to hide small combs, jewelry, or even letters in their hair. If you're particularly ambitious, add in some hairpieces. Rats, no, not the animal, the stuffed fabric forms used to pad out your volume. And perhaps a decorative comb that could double as a defensive weapon. Of course, there's the matter of colour. The ideal is glossy, dark, and rich. Never grey, never bland. If your hair isn't naturally raven or chestnut, there are plenty of concoctions available to help. Some are so effective they'll dye your pillowcases for a week and your scalp for a month. If all else fails, you can always wear a cap, a ribbon, or a decorative net. Just be prepared for the occasional child tugging at your bun to see if it's real. But with beauty comes danger. The Victorian home is lit by candles and gas lamps, and your new hairdo is now approximately as flammable as a haystack. Every evening is a round of avoid the open flame as you weave through parlours with the grace of a tightrope walker and the paranoia of someone who's seen one too many updos go up in smoke. Parties and balls are high stakes. One careless turn near a candelabra, and suddenly you're the entertainment for the evening and a cautionary tale by breakfast. Men don't get off easy either. The well-coiffed Victorian gentleman must oil, brush, and part his hair with as much care as his female counterpart. Sideburns, moustaches, and beards are sculpted with wax, trimmed to within an inch of their lives, and subject to much debate in the club. A man's hair is his dignity, his calling card, and occasionally his downfall, if it droops mid-supper. Finally, at the end of the day, comes the great unravelling. The pins come out, the padding deflates, and your real hair sighs in relief. You stare in the mirror, exhausted, slightly sticky, and grateful you made it through another day without a visit from the fire brigade. In Victorian England, hair isn't just personal grooming, it's a daily gamble with style, sanity, and spontaneous combustion. And remember, if you do catch fire, just try to faint gracefully. It's the fashionable thing to do. Breakfast is a dry biscuit and a half cup of weak tea. Lunch, perhaps a lettuce leaf, and an existential crisis. Victorian diets are less about health, more about cultivating a look of poetic suffering. The prevailing beauty ideal is delicate, and nothing says delicate like the ability to pass out at a moment's notice. If you're hungry, congratulations. You're halfway to being fashionable. Your goal isn't just to fit into your corset, it's to ensure that when people see you, they immediately worry about your iron levels. In Victorian society, being robust is suspicious. Being slightly translucent is aspirational. It all starts at the breakfast table, which, despite its grandeur, offers all the nutritional value of a crouton in the wind. Your choices are as follows. A hard biscuit, good for breaking teeth and spirits. A teaspoon of fruit preserves, if you're feeling reckless. And a cup of tea so pale it could be mistaken for hot water. Butter is allowed, if you can spread it thin enough to be invisible. Heaven help you if you accidentally enjoy it. gluttony is best left to the lower classes. Lunch is a test of self-restraint, social competition, and the ancient art of pretending to be full. Imagine a dainty plate featuring a single lettuce leaf, possibly garnished with a sigh. If someone offers you a slice of ham, you must decline with a fluttering hand and a vague allusion to digestive weakness. Every bite is measured, every crumb accounted for. If you finish your meal and don't immediately want to lie down, you're probably doing it wrong. Snacks are for the desperate or the rebellious. Maybe a wafer here, a candied violet there, just enough to maintain blood sugar but not enough to suggest actual contentment. If you catch yourself feeling energetic, consider a glass of vinegar and water to bring your mood and complexion right back to tragic. Dinner is the day's grand performance. The table groans under the weight of food you're not supposed to eat. Roast meats, sauces, cheeses, pastries. Your job is to navigate it all with the skill of a professional mime. You move the food around your plate, take delicate bites, and occasionally press a handkerchief to your lips to avoid the risk of looking too satisfied. The correct response to a second helping is a faint gasp and the announcement that you couldn't possibly. If you feel weak, that's just further evidence of your refinement. Fainting at the dinner table is practically a sport. Smelling salts are passed around as casually as after-dinner mints, and the best families compete for whose daughter has the most dramatic collapse. Bonus points if you swoon onto an expensive carpet or faint in the arms of a suitable suitor. If you can make it through dessert without having to be revived, you might actually be considered sturdy, an accusation that could haunt your reputation for years. Behind the curtain, of course, not everyone is following the rules. Servants sneak leftovers to the kitchen. Stout aunts hoard shortbread in their sewing baskets. And there are always whispers about that one cousin who was caught eating an entire sausage roll behind the potted fern. But these are exceptions, stories told in hushed tones as warnings of what happens to those who put appetite before aesthetics. Health consequences? Victorians are undeterred. A little dizziness is a small price to pay for the ethereal, fragile look immortalized in watercolor portraits and tragic novels. Should you fall ill, and you probably will, you'll be prescribed a diet of even less food, more tea, and possibly a nice restorative trip to the seaside where, ironically, you'll be encouraged to walk the cliffs in a wool dress while continuing to avoid anything with calories. So you power through, subsisting on air, willpower, and Victorian moral superiority. You may be hungry, you may be dizzy, but you are fashionable. After all, nothing says beauty quite like the faint sound of your own stomach rumbling at the breakfast table. If you're not swooning at least once per garden party, are you even trying? Fainting is a core part of Victorian life, and the best families compete over who has the most dramatic collapses. Smelling salts, your new best friend. Fainting isn't just a medical mishap in the Victorian era, it's practically an art form. Garden parties, balls, church services, any event worth attending has at least one person gracefully keeling over into a conveniently placed hedge or chaise lounge. A faint, well-timed is social currency, a gentle reminder that you are both exquisitely sensitive and extremely fashionable. Forget awkward small talk. Just drop to the floor and let your reputation rise with every gasp from the crowd. Why all the swooning? The reasons are as endless as the skirt hems. Corsets cinched to within an inch of your dignity, starvation diets designed for maximum fragility, and a climate where even a mild breeze is considered a health hazard. If you manage to stay upright through an entire soiree, you're either made of sterner stuff or, worse, lacking in refined sensibilities. The ideal Victorian lady is supposed to look as though she might faint at the mere mention of strong opinions, unchaperoned men, or, scandal of scandals, a slightly salty biscuit. Smelling salts become your daily companion, tucked discreetly into your reticule or up your sleeve. A fashionable lady never leaves home without her little vial of ammonia-based magic. There's an entire cottage industry dedicated to beautifully decorated bottles, some so ornate they're more jewelry than emergency medical equipment. At a crowded gathering, you can often spot the veterans. They take a whiff with practiced ease, eyes fluttering, before launching into a genteel collapse worthy of a tragic opera heroine. There's a hierarchy to fainting, of course. An impromptu swoon at a dull poetry reading? Admirable. Toppling over during the waltz at the governor's ball? Spectacular. But beware. Too many collapses and people will start to wonder if you're faking it for attention or, even worse, genuinely ill. The trick is to faint just enough to stay in the social spotlight, but not so often that you end up being prescribed an extended rest cure in a remote seaside town, where you might die of boredom before anything else. Gentlemen are not immune. True, their corsets, yes, men wore them too, sometimes are usually less punishing, but swooning is occasionally used as a handy excuse to avoid tedious social obligations. There are stories of men feigning faintness to escape long sermons, or particularly aggressive matchmaking aunts. The key is to recover quickly and look slightly haunted for the remainder of the evening. For servants and working-class Victorians, fainting isn't quite as glamorous. If the maid collapses, she's more likely to be revived with a splash of cold water and a lecture about malingering. But for you, fainting is a display of status and sensitivity. After all, nothing says delicate flower like being gently propped up against the rose bushes while a small crowd fans you and debates whether your corset was simply too well laced. The post-faint recovery is almost as important as the collapse itself. You'll be offered a restorative sip of sherry, a cool cloth for your brow, and plenty of sympathetic glances. If you've really nailed it, the local gossip will retell your dramatic episode for weeks, embellishing the story until you're rumoured to have fainted straight into the arms of a handsome viscount or onto the exact spot where Queen Victoria once stood. As you return to the garden, cheeks artfully flushed, remember, in Victorian England, life is a tightrope walk between grace and gravity. Smelling salts at the ready, you're always just one corset string away from another memorable moment. And should you feel the familiar wooziness, don't panic. Just aim for the nearest soft surface and let the admiration wash over you. Want glowing, poreless skin? Victorians used everything from vinegar washes to arsenic wafers. Results may include luminosity, dizziness, or spontaneous peeling. The Victorian quest for the perfect complexion is a full-time occupation, part science experiment and part horror story. Every morning, you face the mirror and declare war on your pores. The ideal is simple. You must look smooth, delicate, pale, and vaguely ill, like you're starring in a tragic opera. Or perhaps you just saw a ghost and haven't recovered. To get there, you'll try any recipe that comes recommended by a friend, a magazine, or your local apothecary, regardless of whether the ingredients are safe, effective, or even technically legal. Step 1. The vinegar wash. Nothing says fresh start like splashing your face with astringent that stings, burns, and leaves you smelling faintly like a salad. Vinegar is believed to tighten pores and, if you're unlucky, strip away your sense of dignity along with your top layer of skin. If vinegar isn't enough, you move on to lemon juice, highly recommended by beauty columns for its ability to lighten freckles, fade blemishes, and remind you what true pain feels like. But the real magic happens when you discover arsenic wafers. Yes, actual arsenic, pressed into delicate little tablets and sold as the secret to a glowing, flawless face. Just dissolve one on your tongue, no, really, and wait. Side effects may include headaches, mild disorientation, or a near-death experience, but beauty is suffering after all. These wafers are so popular that women trade them like candy, and the more you use, the more you glow from the inside out. Occasionally, you might also glow in the dark, but that's just a bonus. For those who prefer their poison on the outside, there are lead-based powders and creams, each promising to erase the sins of the sun and years of questionable life choices. The best brands offer a finish so matte it absorbs light. If you notice numbness or the urge to nap for several hours after application, don't worry, that's just your body quietly rebelling. If your complexion is still less than porcelain perfect, it's time for exfoliation Victorian style. Homemade scrubs are concocted from ground rice, chalk, or even finely crushed seashells. Rub it in until your skin feels raw and looks, for one brief, glorious moment, completely flawless. Ignore the redness and tingling. Those are just signs that the product is working. For stubborn spots, there's always carbolic acid, a strong antiseptic. Just dab it on, steel your nerves, and hope you don't end up with a patchy chemical burn. Face masks are another must. Egg whites, oatmeal, rosewater, mashed strawberries, and even raw meat make appearances in recipes passed down from generation to generation. Your goal is to emerge from the bathroom looking dewy and ethereal, but sometimes you just end up smelling like a fruitcake left out in the rain. If all else fails, there's always the ever-popular option of simply hiding behind a lace veil and pretending you're mysterious. Throughout the day, your skin may feel tight, your vision slightly blurry, and your cheeks may tingle or peel. These are all perfectly normal in the Victorian beauty world, a sign that your regime is tough enough to scare off lesser mortals. If friends ask about your glow, you reply with a gentle smile and a warning not to touch your face unless they want a little lead on their gloves. Of course, beauty comes at a cost. Some evenings, your reflection reveals not the soft, pale vision you'd hoped for, but a blotchy map of battle scars from your chemical adventures. Still, you soldier on. If your face looks like it might peel off, you can always apply more powder, or just claim you're embracing the consumptive look on purpose. After all, in Victorian England, the line between radiant and radioactive is thinner than your new, alarmingly smooth skin. But you did it. You achieved complexion perfection, even if the side effects include glowing, dizziness, or spontaneous peeling. It's all part of the price you pay to be the fairest, and possibly faintest, in the room. Dental care is, let's say, rustic. Toothpaste is made of chalk and charcoal. Visits to the dentist are to be feared, and not just because Novocaine won't be invented for 50 years. Victorian smiles are an exercise in creative optimism. The ideal is a neat row of small, even teeth, but the reality is often more haunted harpsichord than pearly piano. You start your day with a homemade tooth powder, chalk, salt, and a generous pinch of charcoal for that signature smoky finish. Sometimes a little baking soda is thrown in, just to make your mouth fizz and remind you that oral hygiene is always an adventure. Toothbrushes, if you have one, are carved from bone or wood, with bristles plucked from animals that definitely did not volunteer for the job. If you're lucky, the bristles stay in the brush. If you're not, you'll spend a few awkward moments picking them out from between your back molars, vowing to write a strongly worded letter to your local apothecary. Of course, the Victorians love a good home remedy. Bad breath? Gargle with vinegar or rinse your mouth with strong tea and hope for the best. For the truly dedicated, there's powdered brick, lemon juice, or even a dab of ammonia. Just a smidge, and only if you're feeling brave. None of these actually fix your teeth, but they'll leave your mouth so overwhelmed by flavor confusion that you'll forget your gums are receding. The real horror, however, is the dentist. This is a man who does double duty as a barber and a minor local surgeon, often all in the same chair and sometimes in the same hour. The dental toolkit looks suspiciously like it's just been borrowed from the stable. There are pliers, hooks, scary files, and one or two implements whose only purpose seems to be instilling fear. The word anesthesia is not in anyone's vocabulary yet. The closest thing to pain relief is a shot of gin and a hearty slap on the back. Toothache is so common it's practically a rite of passage. You start with the gentle ache of a sweet tooth, escalate to nightly throbbing, and graduate to the kind of pain that makes you question your existence and all your life choices. The cure? Extraction, of course. Why keep a bad tooth when you can just yank it out and display it in a little jar as proof of your bravery? A successful extraction is usually accompanied by fainting, cursing, or both, followed by a week of soup and regret. And let's not even mention tooth decay. Sugar is suddenly fashionable among the rich, imported at great expense, and consumed with reckless abandon in cakes, teas, and candies. The result? A mouthful of cavities and blackened molars, a status symbol if you're wealthy enough to afford sweets, and a tragedy if you're not. The poor chew hard bread and hope their teeth outlast their shoes. False teeth are an option for those who want to preserve their public smile. Early dentures are crafted from ivory, bone, or, brace yourself, other people's teeth. Yes, you might be smiling at a ball with a mouthful of borrowed molars, straight from the battlefield or the nearest graveyard. The fit is approximate. Chewing anything harder than pudding is an act of pure faith. And yet, Victorians persevere. Smiles are carefully managed, lips pressed together for portraits, laughter kept quiet and mysterious. If someone flashes a full set of bright white teeth, they're either a time traveler or a liar. Courting couples exchange coy glances rather than wide grins, and even the boldest never risk an open-mouthed laugh at a garden party. So you scrub, gargle, endure, and try to keep your dental woes out of the gossip columns. Because in Victorian England, the road to beauty is lined with tooth powder, questionable dentistry, and a remarkable tolerance for pain. Your smile may be crooked, blackened, or slightly haunted, but you wear it with the kind of pride only centuries of suffering can produce. The rules? Hair on your head? As much as possible. Hair anywhere else? Absolutely not. Removal methods include tweezers, pumice stones, and high-pitched whimpering. Victorian beauty is all about carefully curated contradictions. You must strive for the thickest, glossiest mane of hair that will fit atop your head, preferably styled high enough to interfere with the trajectory of low-flying birds, but every other follicle must be hunted to extinction. If eyebrows are supposed to be faint rumors, body hair is nothing less than a scandal. The ideal is smooth, marble-like skin, achieved through a combination of relentless self-discipline, homemade torture devices, and blind optimism. The morning battle begins with a hunt. You squint at your arms in the pale morning light, searching for even the faintest suggestion of fuzz. Any sign of hair is dealt with swiftly. Tweezers, sharpened to a lethal point, are your primary weapon. Plucking is a meditative practice, best done in silence so as not to alarm your family with the steady stream of creative curses. Each tiny root feels like it's connected directly to your soul. For the larger battlegrounds, there's the pumice stone, essentially nature's sandpaper. Victorians recommend gently rubbing your skin in small circles. Reality: you will exfoliate away at least one layer of skin before you get anywhere near hairless. Your reward is raw, slightly pink skin that stings when you put on your gloves, but at least won't be whispered about at afternoon tea. If you're especially dedicated or desperate, you might try homemade depilatory creams. These are mixed from ingredients found in the average Victorian kitchen: lime, quicksilver, and sometimes, just for fun, arsenic. Results are unpredictable. Some users report hairlessness. Others are weeks spent in bed with what they generously call chemical sunburn. If your skin doesn't melt, you'll be smooth as porcelain, which, of course, is the goal. Shaving is an option, but only for the truly daring. Razors are not the disposable, safety-checked wonders of the modern age. They are essentially tiny scythes wielded with one trembling hand and a healthy fear of tetanus. One slip, and you're explaining to the doctor why your knee now has a permanent dimple. Body hair removal isn't just for women, either. Men are expected to have impeccably smooth cheeks and, for those ambitious enough, clean-shaven chests. The manly pursuit of removing whiskers involves a daily dance with straight razors, soaps, and enough aftershave to strip paint from a carriage. A gentleman's neck must remain as smooth as his reputation. If all else fails, you turn to disguise. Long gloves cover arms, high collars mask necks, and thick stockings conceal rebellious ankles. Victorian fashion is, in many ways, a conspiracy of concealment, lace, ruffles, and strategic accessories, all designed to hide the stubble you couldn't quite conquer. There's a reason women's magazines devote entire pages to the artful use of fabric. But the real social pressure comes from the relentless scrutiny. Aunt Mildred's eagle eyes can spot a stray hair from across the garden, and the ensuing gossip will outlast the next 4 generations. A whispered accusation of fuzz can send a family's social standing plummeting faster than a souffle in a thunderstorm. The stakes are high, and the tweezers are always close at hand. After the battle, you nurse your wounds and apply a generous layer of rosewater, both for the sting and the lingering aroma of overachievement. You emerge into society smooth, shining, and possibly missing several layers of skin. But it's worth it. You are now one step closer to the impossible Victorian ideal. Gloriously hirsute where it's allowed, and resolutely marble everywhere else. So hold your head high and your sleeves lower. And remember, in Victorian England, beauty isn't just pain. It's precision hair management under the threat of polite but brutal social warfare. Everyone claims to be naturally beautiful. This is a lie. You will spend hours applying homemade mixtures just to pretend you woke up looking like a wax figurine. The Victorian era is the birthplace of the "I woke up like this" myth. Except here, this means luminous, poreless, and suspiciously porcelain skin, as if you've spent the night sleeping upright in a glass case. No one talks about makeup. It's vanity, paint, or improper. The goal is to look like you've never so much as glanced at a rouge pot, even as your dressing table looks like a science experiment sponsored by the local apothecary and your own persistent insecurities. You rise at dawn, ready to wage war on the evidence of your humanity. The morning regimen begins with cold cream, mixed from rosewater, beeswax, and a prayer for no allergic reactions. This is followed by a layer of rice powder, dabbed and dusted until your complexion is as pale as a ghost with a delicate social calendar. Lead-based whiteners might make an appearance, just a gentle reminder that beauty in this era sometimes means sacrificing future organ function for present-day glow. The cheeks present a challenge. Blush is a dirty word, so you resort to pinching, dabbing on a little beetroot juice, or, if you're feeling modern, applying Spanish paper, thin sheets soaked in dye that you press against your skin and hope nobody sniffs too closely. The look you're going for is windswept and tragic, as though you've just received sad news by carrier pigeon. Next, the eyes. No smoky shadows or bold liners here. You might, however, rub a bit of lamp black onto your lashes for subtle definition, if you're truly daring. A dab of belladonna in each eye to dilate the pupils, a trick that gives you that glassy, soulful gaze prized by poets and people who've never read a medical warning. Of course, you must be careful. Too much, and you're less ethereal beauty and more startled ferret in a thunderstorm. Lip color is the final hurdle. Red lips are considered shocking, unless you achieve them by natural means. A dab of crushed geranium or a lick of wine will do. Or you can bite your lips before entering the room and then try to look as if you did it absent-mindedly, not in a desperate attempt to outshine your cousin Edwina. The effect should be fleeting, delicate, and completely deniable if anyone questions your flush. The true test is the final inspection. Will your mother, aunt, or some visiting relative notice? You must appear radiant, but with no evidence of effort. If a guest comments, "My, how healthy you look," you've gone too far. The highest compliment is to be asked if you've been sleeping well, when in fact you've barely slept at all, having spent 3 hours mixing, blending, and nervously checking your handiwork in the mirror. Everything must last through a full day of social landmines, gossip in the parlour, croquet on the lawn, and that one aunt who always insists on hugging you firmly and, somehow, always manages to smudge your hard work. Rain is your natural enemy, as is sweat, laughter, and anything that could cause your powder to streak, your rouge to blotch, or your eyelashes to startle a guest. At the end of the day, you wash it all away with soap, water, and quiet regret. Your skin sighs in relief as you consider tomorrow's performance. Because in Victorian England, the natural look is anything but. It's hours of stealth, skill, and sacrifice. all so you can pretend your beauty is effortless. And in a way, that's the biggest magic trick of all. Tiny, pointed boots are in. They're uncomfortable, impractical, and possibly designed by someone who hates feet. If you can still feel your toes by midday, you're doing it wrong. Victorian fashion is all about silhouettes, wasp waists, mountains of skirts, and, down at ground level, dainty, tortuous footwear. Your boots are the finishing touch to an outfit already intent on restricting your circulation. Slipping your foot into a Victorian shoe is less putting on footwear and more testing your pain tolerance. If your shoe fits, you're suspicious. If it doesn't, congratulations, you're on trend. The day begins with the selection of your walking boots. These are, ironically, the worst shoes for actual walking. They are crafted from stiff leather, lined with silk or cotton for approximately 3 minutes of comfort, and shaped into points so sharp you could use them as letter openers. If you have wide feet, the cobbler will simply smile and suggest you break them in. An activity that usually ends with blisters, regrets, and possibly an unscheduled trip to the family doctor. Shoelaces must be drawn tight. The tighter, the better. Loose shoes are an unforgivable fashion crime, a sure sign of moral laxity. You may use a button hook, a device invented by the same evil genius who brought you corsets, to fasten the endless rows of tiny buttons up the sides. By the time you're done, you'll need a rest and perhaps a fresh application of smelling salts. But wait, there's more. Heels are the height of sophistication, not the chunky, supportive kind. These are narrow, dainty, and engineered to sink into every patch of grass, cobblestone, or soft carpet. Navigating a Victorian garden party in these shoes is an obstacle course. The sound of women's heels sinking into the lawn is practically the anthem of the social season. Now, try walking. Each step is a calculated gamble. If you manage not to topple, twist an ankle, or trip over your own skirt, you're doing better than most. Toe cramps are a badge of honor. If your feet fall asleep by noon, you're just getting started. There's always a moment in every gathering when a lady pauses, eyes wide, and wonders if she'll ever feel her big toe again. She won't, but that's the price of elegance. Of course, there are alternatives for the truly desperate. Soft slippers worn indoors, thick knitted stockings, or the fabled house shoe, which is basically a glorified sock with aspirations. But these are for the privacy of home. No one would risk being caught outside in anything less than full leather. Heaven forbid you be seen in public without a proper heel. Social ruin would surely follow. Men don't have it much easier. Fashionable gentlemen squeeze their feet into polished boots with heels and impossibly narrow toes. Dandies compete to see who can wear the pointiest, shiniest footwear, even if it means sacrificing 3 toenails and half their dignity by dinner. Blisters are inevitable. Corns, bunions, and calluses are just character. Victorian apothecaries do a brisk trade in foot balms and bandages, and there's always a relative with a horror story about the time their pinky toe just gave up and fell off. Removing your boots at the end of the day is a ceremonial event, accompanied by sighs, groans, and the quiet hope that your feet will forgive you by morning. Still, the illusion of daintiness persists. In Victorian England, suffering is invisible, and your boots, pinching, binding, numbing, are just another part of the costume. So you lace up, stand tall, on tiptoe, and remember, the pain may be real, but at least your feet look absolutely fabulous, at least until you try to walk. Your mother, aunt, or an elderly neighbor is always watching. Beauty isn't just about appearance, it's about being seen behaving correctly. Make one wrong move, and word spreads faster than smallpox. In Victorian England, personal privacy is a myth, and you are never truly alone, not even in the garden, not even behind a potted fern. If you think you have a moment to yourself, just wait. From behind a lace curtain or above the rim of a teacup, a pair of eagle eyes is monitoring your every twitch. The chaperone is part guardian, part surveillance camera, and part alarm system, except this one gossips with terrifying efficiency. It begins at home. The moment you emerge from your room, the daily inspection commences. Is your hair properly pinned? Gloves on? Shoes buttoned? Ribbons tied? Complexion sufficiently tragic? Even the most minor slip, a rumpled hem, a crooked bonnet, invites a gentle rebuke and a pointed reminder of what the neighbors might say. You quickly learn that the real measure of beauty is not how you see yourself, but how you're seen by others, preferably while doing absolutely nothing scandalous, ever. Going out is a minefield. Your chaperone accompanies you everywhere. To the market, the park, the dressmaker's shop. She walks half a pace behind, arms folded, radiating judgment. It's like traveling with a live-in reputation manager who believes public disgrace can strike at any moment. Her special skill? Spotting trouble a mile away and making it known through a series of meaningful coughs and discreetly raised eyebrows. You smile demurely, speak only when spoken to, and keep your eyes strictly averted from anything remotely interesting. Social events are a chaperone's Olympics. Ballrooms, garden parties, church picnics. Every gathering is an opportunity to collect intel and dispense it later. No flirtation goes unnoticed. No lingering glance escapes the record. If you dare to accept a dance from the wrong partner, you can feel the psychic tug of Aunt Mildred's disapproval from across the room. The chaperone keeps notes, mental or literal, and should you laugh too loudly, or heaven forbid, eat an extra biscuit, the entire extended family will know by breakfast. Beneath all this supervision is an unspoken rule. Beauty is as much about grace, decorum, and invisible boundaries as it is about curls and corsets. You must be lovely, yes, but also modest, quiet, and perpetually on the verge of swooning from excessive virtue. Crossing your ankles? Good. Crossing the street unescorted? Scandalous. The line between angelic and a cautionary tale is so thin it could be used for embroidery. And yet, your chaperone is not always your enemy. Sometimes she's a silent ally, saving you from an unwanted suitor with a sudden, conveniently timed need for smelling salts. Sometimes, if you're lucky, she'll pretend not to see when you sneak a second scone at tea. But make no mistake, her primary job is to ensure you do not end up in anyone's diary under today's disasters. For Victorian men, surveillance is subtler but just as relentless. Mothers and maiden aunts vet every acquaintance, scrutinize friendships, and happen to appear whenever a promising match is nearby. A man's reputation must be spotless. Even the suspicion of impropriety can affect not just marriage prospects, but the standing of the entire family. At the end of the day, you learn to perform under scrutiny, moving, speaking, and even smiling with just enough restraint to avoid commentary. Every graceful curtsy, every well-timed blush, every elegantly timed retreat from the conversation is not just an act of self-presentation, but a defensive maneuver in a world ruled by whispers. So you tuck in your ribbons, perfect your demure gaze, and move through the world watched, judged, and endlessly reported on. In Victorian England, beauty may be pain, but true elegance is surviving the chaperone's gaze with your dignity, mostly intact. Social class is instantly readable by your hair arrangement. The more elaborate, the higher your status, and the more likely you are to develop neck pain. Your day in Victorian England does not truly begin until your hair has been transformed into a masterpiece, or, depending on your social rank, at least a minor work of fiction. A simple bun will not do if you have aspirations above anonymous background character. Your hair is your calling card, your resume, and your social credit score, all twisted together with ribbons and 3 types of pins. For the well-heeled elite, hairstyles are feats of engineering, often requiring both a lady's maid and a small support staff. Imagine spending your morning with your scalp as the stage for the great exhibition. Intricate braids, waterfalls of ringlets, coils, and mysterious structures that seem to defy both gravity and common sense. You are not just preparing to face society, you are preparing for a public unveiling. The tools of the trade are extensive. Hot irons, pomades, combs, hairpieces, rats, the fabric kind, not actual rodents, and a selection of pins sharp enough to double as self-defense in the event of a surprise duel. Ringlets are prized, tight, glossy, and bouncing cheerfully with every head tilt. Achieving them is a trial by fire, literally, as each curl is wrapped around a scalding iron, timed to perfection, and set with a special blend of bear grease and optimism. If you are at the very top of the social pyramid, your hair might be topped with jewels, fresh flowers, ostrich feathers, or, on very special occasions, a small bird cage with an actual canary. Every inch added to your hair is a public declaration: my family can afford not only sugar, but neck massages. For the merely well-off, elaborate updos are the standard. Rows of braids arranged in precise geometric patterns, accented with ribbons in the family colours and a comb or two for extra flair. Maintenance is endless. You must sleep with your head carefully balanced on a bolster pillow, lest your curls collapse and force a morning do-over. You avoid sudden movements, rain, and emotional displays, all deadly to a carefully engineered coiffure. If you are middle class or working class, the rules shift, but the pressure doesn't ease. Simpler buns, modest braids, and a stern middle part are the fashion. Even so, your hair must be tidy and presentable at all times. Heaven help you if a strand escapes its pin during church, or if the wind catches your hair and makes you look like someone who has ever done manual labor. You will spend the next week dodging pointed remarks about letting yourself go. For men, hairstyle hierarchies are equally fierce. A well-groomed side part is essential, preferably achieved with enough hair oil to give you a subtle shine, but not so much that you risk spontaneous combustion near the fireplace. Ambitious gentlemen experiment with sideburns, mustaches, and pomaded pompadours, each carefully sculpted for maximum gravitas. A messy head of hair, meanwhile, is social kryptonite, the Victorian equivalent of showing up to a job interview in pajamas. At every social gathering, your hairstyle is subject to review. The local beauty mavens exchange coded compliments. What lovely structure! Is that real? How? Daring! The higher, more intricate, and more impossible your hair, the greater your social cachet. But also, the greater the chance of developing a tension headache that will last until the next Queen's Jubilee. And so, every evening you unpin, unwind, and massage your scalp, marvelling at the feats of architecture you have survived. In Victorian England, beauty is never effortless, especially not above the shoulders. Your hair is your silent social statement, your shield, and your occasional source of chronic pain. Sleep well. Tomorrow's style will be even grander. The day's finally over. Time to undo the corset, unpin the hair, slather on a night cream that smells like turpentine, and try to sleep while pondering if you'll ever breathe deeply again. Victorian beauty might begin at sunrise, but it never really ends, not even when you're supposed to be resting. Your nighttime routine is less a period of relaxation and more a complicated deconstruction of everything you did to yourself during the day. It begins with a sigh of relief, the slow loosening of whalebone and silk as your corset is finally unlaced. There's a moment of panic, a brief worry that your internal organs have shifted permanently, followed by a dizzy rush of oxygen as your lungs and ribs reclaim long-lost territory. You can actually take a real breath. Don't get used to it. Next is the hair. Unpinning your Victorian updo is a process so involved it could be listed as a team sport. You sit before your mirror, bowl at the ready for bobby pins, combs, fake curls, and whatever else has been hiding in your coiffure since breakfast. Somewhere in there you'll find a lost earring, a sewing needle, and possibly the family cat. Eventually, your hair returns to its natural state, wild, frizzy, and indignant after a day spent in unnatural formation. You brush it out, 100 strokes as recommended by ladies' magazines, and contemplate the ever-growing collection of hair in your brush, evidence that hair loss was an issue long before modern stress. Now for the face. You remove your makeup with an oil-soaked rag or, if you're very posh, a delicate muslin cloth dipped in milk. There's cold cream for cleansing, rose water for toning, and, for the truly dedicated, a homemade mask that smells like something you'd use to polish silver. The goal is to erase all evidence of actual living. No blush, no powder, no mascara, just the fresh, natural pallor of someone who has never seen the sun or a decent night's sleep. Skincare, of course, is not for the faint of heart. Your night cream is a concoction of lanolin, beeswax, almond oil, and whatever mysterious substance the local apothecary is pushing this week. The instructions promise luminous skin by morning, but so far, results have included mild tingling, alarming peeling, and a lingering scent of turpentine that attracts both compliments and moths. Nightwear is another delicate operation. Forget comfy pajamas. You step into a voluminous cotton nightgown with more ruffles than scents, and maybe a nightcap for that extra touch of bedtime glamour. The aim is to look modest enough for a midnight visit from the vicar, but also comfortable enough to actually sleep, assuming you can find a position that doesn't set off your residual corset pain. Getting into bed. You wrestle with sheets, blankets, and a counterpane so heavy it feels like you're being gently smothered for your own good. You arrange yourself, careful not to muss your hair or crush your night cream, and take up your book of etiquette or your prayer journal. With the room lit by a single flickering candle, you ponder the important questions of the day. Will your skin ever stop tingling? Will you have enough time to recurl your hair by sunrise? Is it possible to sleep through the sound of your own stomach rumbling from dinner's half-lettuce leaf? As you finally close your eyes, you hope that your beauty sleep is at least half as effective as the advertisements promised. The last thing you see is the dim silhouette of your dressing table, bottles and jars lined up like a row of tiny chemists ready for tomorrow's battle. And you drift off, as graceful as a Victorian lady can, dreaming of a future where sleeping pretty actually means sleeping comfortably. Because in Victorian England, even rest is a performance. Good night, and try not to drool on the antimacassar. Victorian advice columns and beauty manuals offer endless, often bizarre tips. If you're not washing your face in rosewater, egg whites, or hope, are you even trying? The Victorian era is awash in print. Every drawing room is piled with weekly ladies' journals, etiquette books, and compendiums of home beauty secrets. The relentless march of advice begins with titles like How to Be Lovely at All Hours and The Art of Looking Tired, but in a good way. Each magazine is a siren song of helpful suggestions and slightly threatening warnings, urging you to become the best version of yourself, as defined by someone who's never met you and is almost certainly judging you. You start your morning by leafing through the latest issue of The Young Woman's Friend, or perhaps Lady's Own Mirror, ready to learn the secrets that will launch you into the upper echelons of society, or at least keep Aunt Gertrude's remarks to a minimum. Some tips are easy. Never frown, lest your face freeze that way. Others are more demanding. Walk with a sprig of parsley in your shoe for fresh breath, and a potato in your pocket to prevent freckles. Recipes for homemade beauty concoctions abound. Need a facial scrub? Try breadcrumbs and sour cream. For hair growth, the manual recommends rubbing your scalp nightly with a mixture of brandy, onion juice, and positive thinking. If you wish to banish freckles, you're advised to dab them with elderflower water and recite a short prayer. The success rate is not published, but that's hardly the point. The journey is its own reward, or at least a decent story for the next tea party. The advice columns are, if anything, even more entertaining. Readers write in with burning questions. How may I discourage the growth of sideburns? Is it unladylike to perspire while walking? My complexion has a certain greenish tint. Should I worry? The responses are delivered in the calm, omniscient voice of Victorian authority, blending gentle condescension with an air of clinical detachment. Dear troubled, the wearing of tight gloves at all times will discourage roughness of hand and spirit. If fainting persists, consult your physician or a nearby chaise lounge. Fashion plates and etiquette quizzes keep you on your toes. You study diagrams showing the correct way to hold a fan, the appropriate angle for bowing, and exactly how many buttons a glove should have for church versus market. There are charts ranking everything from hairstyle complexity to acceptable levels of eyebrow. If you deviate from the prescribed path, you risk not only social embarrassment, but possibly an entire paragraph in a rival's diary. And it's not just beauty. Manuals cover every aspect of life, from the soulful arrangement of bonnets to the proper way to eat a pear in public. Hint, never at all. There are tips for speaking softly, fainting gracefully, and composing your face in case you're caught off guard by a passing duke. The unspoken message? You are always one missed memo away from disaster. Somewhere between the advice for soft hands and recipes for a more delicate nose, you begin to suspect that the true purpose of these books is not to make you beautiful, but to keep you very, very busy. If you follow every instruction, there will be no time left for mischief, improper thoughts, or even a nap. Victorian beauty is less about self-expression and more about mastering an endless obstacle course of rules. At the end of the day, you close your manual, knowing that tomorrow will bring new, slightly more bewildering guidance. Still, you dutifully rub your cheeks with cucumber, powder your hair with violet dust, and say a brief prayer of thanks that, at least for tonight, you manage to follow the instructions without accidentally turning yourself green. Because in Victorian England, beauty is always just a page turn away, and desperation is forever in style. If someone in your family dies, and let's face it, they probably will, you must dress in black for months or even years, following strict rules about fabrics, jewelry, and even facial expressions. In Victorian England, loss is as much a sartorial crisis as an emotional one. The death of a relative, however distant, triggers an elaborate choreography of fabric, etiquette, and social signaling that would make even the most seasoned fashionista break out in a cold sweat. Grief isn't just a feeling, it's a uniform, and woe betide anyone who gets it wrong. Your journey into mourning begins with the official notice, perhaps a telegram or a neighbour sprinting up the garden path with news. Instantly, your wardrobe is on high alert. Out come the black dresses, each more sombre than the last, all made from crepe, bombazine, or other fabrics with the texture of sadness itself. You must forgo silk, satin, and anything remotely shiny. Light must not reflect from your person, lest you appear to be enjoying yourself. The first phase is deep mourning. Picture this. You're encased in heavy, matte black from head to toe, veils so thick you could rob a bank in daylight. Gloves, bonnets, and even handkerchiefs must be black. Accessories? Minimal and mournful, jet beads, dull lockets with a lock of hair, perhaps a cameo if you're feeling rebellious. Even your undergarments should be dark. Rumour has it, Queen Victoria herself insisted on black bloomers, setting the gold, or rather onyx standard for the rest of society. And the timeline? Rigid. For a husband or parent, at least a year in deep mourning, followed by half mourning, a phase that slowly reintroduces grey, lavender, and the faintest hints of mauve, as if you're cautiously flirting with the idea of joy. For more distant relatives, a brisk few months will suffice. But don't get caught smiling too soon, or someone will write a poem about your insensitivity. Mourning is a family affair. The household drapes mirrors in black, silences the piano, and douses all parties for the foreseeable future. Even children must obey, their little pinafores rendered sombre by custom and threat of grandmotherly scolding. Social events are strictly limited. If you must attend a gathering, prepare to be a walking monument to loss, moving quietly, speaking softly, and never ever dancing. Beauty routines do not take a break either. There are magazines dedicated to mourning cosmetics, which advise the subtle application of rice powder to prevent a sweaty, grief-stricken shine. Eyes should be discreetly reddened, but never puffy. No one wants to be remembered for uneven tears. Even your posture is affected, slouch, and you risk being labelled heartless. Stand too tall, and you're accused of moving on. The strict code is enforced by a network of well-meaning but terrifying acquaintances. Any breach, an inappropriately cheery brooch, a secret smile, or a slip of colour will be noted and discussed at length. Your ability to follow the rules is not just a reflection of your grief, but of your family's honor and, by extension, your own marriage prospects. Nothing says eligible quite like mourning done impeccably. Yet beneath the layers of bombazine, there's a strange camaraderie among the bereaved. Women exchange nods of solidarity in shop aisles, share tips on the best laundresses for crepe, and offer gentle encouragement when it's finally time to add a hint of lavender to the collar. Mourning is both performance and protection, a way to shield yourself from gossip, give structure to chaos, and, occasionally, hide a secret smirk at the absurdity of it all. So you wrap yourself in black, carry your jet beads, and step out with dignity. In Victorian England, grief may last a lifetime, but at least you'll look the part. Showers are rare. Soap is optional. To cope, everyone douses themselves in heavy floral perfumes, hoping to mask the scent of sweat, despair, and lead-based face powder. The air in Victorian England is a heady mixture of ambition and anxiety, but mostly it just smells like a bustling crowd trapped inside a greenhouse. Good hygiene, at least by modern standards, is more an aspiration than a reality. Bathing is a special event, not a daily habit. A logistical marathon involving buckets, kettles, privacy screens, and the sort of family negotiations normally reserved for inheritance disputes. Most days, the best you can hope for is a brisk sponge bath behind a locked door, interrupted only 3 times by siblings, servants, or a passing cat. Soap, when you use it, is a rustic affair. The most common brands are lye-based and roughly as gentle as sandpaper. Scents are limited, plain, slightly less plain, and, for the adventurous, elderflower, which is just plain with a side of disappointment. So, it's no wonder that Victorians turned to perfume. The more powerful, the better. Perfume bottles line every dressing table like soldiers prepared for battle. Lavender water, rose attar, violets, musk, patchouli, and the ever-popular eau de cologne all are pressed into service. The recipes are potent. 1 spritz, and you're enveloped in a fragrant cloud that can stun small animals and clear crowded hallways. Ladies delicately dab scent behind their ears, at their wrists, and sometimes under their arms, hoping to keep unpleasant realities at bay. If you're feeling bold, you freshen your handkerchief and fan, just to create a fragrant breeze wherever you go. Deodorant, in the modern sense, does not exist. The closest you'll find is a dusting of powder, often made from rice or orris root, sometimes mixed with the same lead or arsenic you just used on your face. The goal is simple: absorb, mask, distract. If all else fails, a tightly laced bodice and layers of petticoats will keep your own aroma to yourself, at least until you try to dance. At that point, everyone just agrees to ignore reality and blame it on the cheese. Of course, there is an etiquette to scent. The right perfume can say cultured, delicate, or just had a bath. The wrong one? Trying too hard, covering up something dreadful, or possibly hiding in the lilac bush. Too much, and you risk gossip, or spontaneous sneezing fits. Too little, and someone might offer you a bar of soap as a subtle hint. Magazines debate the merits of rose versus lavender, and offer guidance for every occasion: funeral, garden party, morning stroll, fainting episode. Men, too, are under pressure. A dapper Victorian gentleman is expected to sport a discreet, masculine fragrance, bay rum, sandalwood, or something helpfully labelled invigorating tonic. After a morning spent wrestling with shaving soap, he may dab a bit of cologne on his neck and hope for the best. Gentlemen's clubs are said to reek of tobacco, pomade, and competitive self-delusion. Every so often, rumours swirl about someone who has gone native and started bathing every day, clearly unstable and probably French. For the rest, a heavy floral scent is simply the price of doing business. You do what you must to survive the parlour, the carriage ride, and the waltz, secure in the knowledge that your perfume will linger long after your reputation has left the room. By evening, your scent has become your calling card, a trail of lavender and mystery, or possibly a warning. You might never know what your friends really think of your favourite fragrance, But you can always take comfort in the fact that nobody, absolutely nobody, will smell your despair. So dab, spritz and powder away. In Victorian England, cleanliness may be next to godliness, but an overpowering bouquet is the real secret to survival. You must sit up straight at all times, ideally with a book balanced on your head. Slouching is social death, and also back pain for life. In the Victorian era, posture isn't just about looking good, it's about survival. Forget modern wellness trends here. Alignment is enforced with the same zeal as the family silver inventory. From the moment you can walk, your entire existence is a battle against gravity and the ever-watchful gaze of relatives who firmly believe that a straight spine is next to godliness. Training starts young. Small children are instructed to sit up, shoulders back, chin in, ankles crossed, knees together. If you waver, your governess gently, or not so gently, prods you back into submission. Any sign of slouching triggers a lecture about character, breeding, and the horrors of ending up like Cousin Charlotte, who once leaned against a banister and was never the same. The underlying message, uprightness is next to virtue, and both are equally exhausting. For ladies, the pressure is relentless. A book on the head isn't just for fun, it's a daily exercise, one meant to teach you the art of gliding, not trudging, through life. The goal is to float serenely across the room, leaving no evidence of physical effort or discomfort, except for the occasional pained grimace when you think no one is looking. In society, posture is a language, and bad posture says, "I've given up, I don't belong here," or worst of all, "I might be French." Seating arrangements are no less demanding. Victorian chairs are masterpieces of discomfort, upright, narrow, and designed to ensure that no one ever relaxes completely. The proper way to sit is at the very edge, back straight, hands folded, eyes demurely cast downward. Crossing your legs is unthinkable, an open invitation to scandal and chiropractic disaster. If you must sit for an extended period, you can shift ever so slightly to relieve pressure. But woe betide the soul who is caught leaning back. The creak of the chair is enough to bring the entire drawing room's attention crashing down. Gentlemen are not immune. While they're allowed slightly more freedom, a straight back and squared shoulders are marks of a gentleman's discipline. Slouching suggests laziness, questionable morals, or, even worse, an inclination toward manual labor. To help maintain decorum, tailors cut suits so that poor posture is instantly visible. There is nowhere to hide. The fashion for stiff collars and restrictive waistcoats isn't an accident. It's all part of the grand conspiracy to keep everyone standing tall and, ideally, not breathing too deeply. If, despite your best efforts, you find yourself slumping, there's always the threat of posture-correcting devices. Some are simple, rigid corset stays, posture braces, or hard-backed posture chairs. Others are more creative, like the infamous posture rod, which forces the wearer into a perfect arc at the risk of losing circulation to the lower extremities. Magazines offer helpful diagrams suggesting daily routines for spine health that mostly sound like methods of medieval torture. But the greatest motivator of all is public scrutiny. In the parlor, in church, at the dinner table, everyone is watching, and everyone is judging. The sharp-eyed matron at the end of the table keeps a silent tally of who's sitting tall and who's courting disgrace. Stories abound of girls whose prospects were dashed by a single slouch, or men who lost a promising match after being caught leaning against a piano. As night falls and you finally let yourself collapse onto your mattress, your back aches, your shoulders throb, and you promise yourself that tomorrow you'll try even harder. Because in Victorian England, posture isn't just about poise, it's about proving, every minute of the day, that you belong among the upright elite, even if you need a stack of books and a steely resolve to keep yourself from ever slouching. For men, the ideal is an epic beard, groomed, waxed, and shaped daily. No pressure. If you're clean-shaven, you might as well be a child or, worse, French. In the grand theatre of Victorian beauty, men are not spectators. They are full cast members with their own brand of follicular agony. While women strive for invisible eyebrows and marble-smooth arms, men are locked in a daily duel with their faces, determined to achieve the most heroic beard in the room. And make no mistake, your beard is not just hair, it's your resume, your bank statement, and your social security number all rolled into one impressive, and sometimes slightly sticky, statement. Growing a beard is not the passive, lazy pursuit it might appear. The beard must be encouraged, cajoled, and sometimes threatened. For the ambitious Victorian gentleman, every morning begins with a thorough brushing, followed by the application of oils, bay rum, sandalwood, and, for the particularly dashing, a splash of bear fat. Each whisker is coaxed into place, and a good beard wax is a must. The idea is to sculpt your face into a vision of manly virtue, not a haystack in a hurricane. There is a hierarchy, of course. The full imperial is the gold standard, thick, long, and perfectly squared off at the jaw. Next is the pointed Van Dyke, carefully trimmed and often paired with a moustache so elaborate it has its own reputation. The mutton chop sideburns are a strong contender for those with powerful cheekbones and the willingness to clear a dinner table by sheer force of facial hair alone. The creative possibilities are endless, provided you have the time, patience, and a high tolerance for daily pomade. The upkeep is relentless. Razors are sharpened with the care of a surgeon prepping for a particularly delicate operation. Scissors are kept gleaming. Combs are stashed in pockets, desk drawers, and on the piano for emergencies. There is a delicate art to keeping the beard soft, untangled, and free from yesterday's lunch. Lint is a constant threat. A stray breadcrumb, left unchecked, could spell social ruin. To appear in public with a wild, unkempt beard is to risk whispers about your moral fibre. A bad beard day can sabotage a business meeting, an engagement, or an afternoon of tea and chess. The greatest insult is to be compared to a Russian novelist or, heaven forbid, an American gold prospector. Men who let their beards run wild with no regard for order, hygiene, or queen and country. And yet, as with all Victorian beauty standards, there are dangers. Beard waxes may contain lead or mercury. Oils can turn rancid if not tended to properly. A beard too grand may attract jealous glances or the unwanted attentions of small birds seeking a nesting place. On windy days, an impressive moustache can become a public hazard, whipping about and occasionally striking innocent bystanders. Of course, not every man can grow a beard worthy of a marble bust. There are potions, tonics, and ointments for the patchy and despairing. Guaranteed to stimulate growth? Claim the ads. Though most result in nothing but an itchy rash and a faint whiff of turpentine. Some gentlemen resort to false whiskers, expertly glued before important meetings, only to spend the event praying the glue holds out longer than the conversation. Clean-shaven faces, on the other hand, are viewed with open suspicion. Perhaps you are very young, very foreign, or deeply eccentric. Maybe you are an actor, a radical, or someone with secrets. In any case, you are not to be entirely trusted. So men brush, trim, oil, and wax. They compare beards at the club, exchange secret recipes for softening balm, and trade horror stories of the time their handlebar mustache fell into the soup. Because in Victorian England, suffering for beauty isn't just for the ladies. Sometimes, the hardest part of being a man is making sure your beard is as impressive as your reputation, if not more so. No outfit is complete without at least 3 impractical accessories. You'll master the art of fluttering a fan, dropping a glove, and carrying a reticule that barely fits a coin. Victorian fashion is never satisfied with mere inconvenience. Each day brings a fresh layer of adornment. Every item designed to signal your status and test your patience. Before leaving the house, you must arm yourself with a full arsenal. Gloves, kid leather for best, cotton for every day, a delicate fan, for communicating everything you dare not say aloud, and a reticule, a miniature purse so small that losing its contents is as inevitable as losing your will to keep searching for them. Start with gloves, those universal symbols of refinement and accidental hand suffocation. Wearing gloves isn't a choice, it's a requirement. They protect your skin from sun, wind, and the scandal of bare knuckles, but mostly they prevent anyone from noticing the calluses you might have developed from, say, opening a letter or existing. The struggle to put them on is a daily battle. Fingers stick, seams twist, and by the time you've yanked them into place, you need a sit-down. If you dare remove them in public, be prepared to do so with such ceremony that you might as well be unveiling the crown jewels. Next, the fan. The fan is much more than a tool for keeping cool. It's a silent, sophisticated language all its own. There's an entire code to master. Flutter for "I'm interested," snap shut for "you're boring me," and hide behind for "I desperately need to yawn." Drop your fan just so, and the right person will know you're open to conversation or marriage proposals. The wrong flick, however, and you'll find yourself engaged to a minor baronet by accident. Fans are beautiful but also breakable. At least 2 are lost, crushed, or snapped in half at every decent gathering. And then, the reticule, the world's most useless purse. This tiny, beaded pouch dangles from your wrist and claims to hold your essentials, by which we mean 1 coin, a lace-edged handkerchief, and, if you're lucky, half a sugar almond. Need to bring a letter, a key, or a dose of smelling salts? Good luck. The reticule's opening is so small that even your own hopes and dreams can't fit inside. By mid-afternoon, most women have resorted to storing necessary items in the folds of their dresses or handing them off to obliging footmen. Other accessories abound, each with their own rules. Parasols must be twirled at the proper angle. Too high is ostentatious, too low is mysterious. And just right will protect your skin while ensuring you remain visible for compliments. Brooches are pinned, gloves are folded just so, and bonnets are tied in bows that seem designed to unravel at the slightest breeze. Jewelry is chosen for its ability to catch the light without catching on your lace collar, and any ornament that makes noise is strictly for the daring or the tone-deaf. For men, accessories are just as serious. A pocket watch is checked, but never too often. A cravat is tied with mathematical precision, and the walking stick is twirled in what can only be described as competitive fashion. For both sexes, there's a strong suspicion that accessories are less about aesthetics and more about giving your hands something to do, so you won't betray your nerves in a world where everyone is watching. Of course, every new accessory means one more thing to lose, break, or forget. By the end of the season, you'll have misplaced more gloves than you ever owned, broken your favorite fan, and spent hours searching for a coin that was never in your reticule in the first place. But that's the Victorian way. If you're not mildly inconvenienced and spectacularly accessorized, are you even dressed at all? So you gather your gloves, clutch your reticule, flutter your fan, and step into society, looking every inch the part, if not entirely sure where you left your patience. In Victorian England, elegance is a daily performance, and your accessories are both your costume and your curse. Step outside looking less than perfect. Prepare for relentless gossip, pointed stares, and the kind of feedback you didn't ask for and definitely don't need. In Victorian England, beauty is a community project, whether you want it to be or not. The moment you cross the threshold of your home, you enter the grand public stage, where every passing neighbour, shopkeeper, and carriage driver is both critic and audience. Any deviation from the current fashion gospel is greeted not with silence, but with a chorus of gasps, whispers, and subtle, or not so subtle, side-eye. It begins innocently enough. A stray curl that escapes your hairpins, a bonnet that sits slightly askew, a smudge of rice powder that looks suspiciously like you fought a pigeon on your way to the bakery. You tell yourself no one will notice. This is adorable, and also wrong. Within 5 minutes, Mrs. Wainwright across the street will have clocked your error, drafted an opening line of commentary, and set off the Victorian telephone chain, aka a network of sharp-eyed women in windows. Gossip is not a background hum in Victorian society. It is the social glue, the daily sport, and the one area where everyone, regardless of gender, class, or bone structure, can participate. A beauty blunder is better than a soap opera. Perhaps your gloves are slightly mismatched. Maybe your complexion is less ghostly porcelain and more livelier than is strictly fashionable. Someone always notices, and with the efficiency of a well-oiled rumour mill, the details travel faster than the Morning Post. The responses are an art form in themselves. Some are delivered with exquisite politeness. "My, what a bold choice," or "how interesting," each more devastating than the last. Others are less subtle. A raised eyebrow, a turned shoulder, a stifled giggle behind a fan. You may hear your name spoken in hushed tones at the milliner's, or find your fashion faux pas immortalized in an anonymous letter to the local advice column. Sometimes it's not what's said, but what isn't. The chilly silence as you enter a room, the slow inspection from hat to boot, the silent shared knowledge that you have, for one brief, glorious moment, become the talk. Beauty standards themselves are so labyrinthine that failure is inevitable. Maybe you went too bold with your eyebrow pencil. Maybe your skirt is a shade too vibrant, your boots too sensible, or your corset slightly less than suffocating. Each rule is invisible until you break it, and by then it's too late. There's an unspoken expectation that you will know exactly what not to do at all times, forever. The aftershocks can linger. Friends and family may gently suggest improvements. Relatives will reminisce about the last time someone wore purple with green, as if it caused a minor scandal and 3 fainting spells. If you're very lucky, your blunder will be overtaken by a new one before the week is out. Perhaps someone's hat will collapse at church, or an unfortunate soul will be seen wearing last year's parasol. Of course, there are the rebels, the bold spirits who dare to go bare, face to the market, wear a sensible shoe to the dance, or show up to tea with a single lock of hair out of place. They are whispered about, pitied, and occasionally admired from afar, but never imitated. For the rest of us, conformity is simply easier, if not always more comfortable. Yet there's something comforting in the chaos. Everyone, at some point, is the subject of public scrutiny, the star of a whispered tale, or the before picture in someone else's mental slideshow. In the end, you adjust your bonnet, smooth your skirt, and step out once more, bracing yourself for the unyielding gaze of Victorian society. Because in this world, beauty is a spectator sport, and sometimes you win simply by surviving the commentary. After a lifetime of squeezing, plucking, starving, painting, and posturing, you'll have the posture of a pretzel, the lungs of a coal miner, and a deep suspicion of anything labelled beauty secret. Victorian beauty isn't just a season, it's a lifelong career. From your earliest days balancing books on your head to your final evenings in a tightly laced morning gown, every waking moment is dedicated to not only fitting the mould, but shrinking yourself until you actually fit inside it. You endure endless rituals, each one promising the perfect face, the ideal waist, the eternal illusion of health. Even as your body quietly collects a souvenir from every fad, cream, and corset. Let's start at the bones. The daily embrace of the corset leaves your spine shaped like a question mark, and your ribs sighing with relief every time the laces are loosened. Long-term devotees find themselves with corset liver, an actual medical term describing the gentle rearrangement of internal organs by aggressive whalebone. Combine that with the fact that taking a deep breath is considered showy and possibly immoral, and you'll be lucky to reach middle age with all your ribs in their original locations. Then there's the skin. Those arsenic wafers, lead powders, and mercurial creams promised you the complexion of an angel, but what you really get is a revolving door of rashes, peeling, and that signature Victorian glow that sometimes means you're slightly radioactive. Your granddaughters will marvel at your soft hands, never knowing they owe their existence to a regimen that also produced mild neurological symptoms and a lasting distrust of the local apothecary. You might think your hair would escape the carnage, but no. After decades of heavy pomades, hot irons, and a few close calls with gas lamps, your scalp is a patchwork of scars and memories. Sleeping pretty means a neck crick and a pillow permanently stained by experimental hair dye. That intricate updo has a price, and it's paid in headaches, hairpins, and the occasional fire hazard. Let's not forget your teeth, those valiant molars that braved brick dust toothpaste and dental appointments performed by a man wielding pliers and optimism. Your smile, so carefully managed in portraits, is now a little gap-toothed and a lot haunted. If you're lucky, you manage to hang on to enough teeth to eat something more substantial than bread soaked in tea. If not, well, Victorian England is always ready with another set, preferably from someone who no longer needs them. But perhaps the most lasting effect is on the mind. After years of dodging public shaming, surviving etiquette quizzes, and enduring the gaze of Aunt Mildred, you develop a sixth sense for disaster, a gentle paranoia, a chronic tension, and the sneaking suspicion that everyone is always watching. Congratulations! You've invented modern anxiety before it's even fashionable. Every strange twinge, every fainting spell, every lingering cough becomes a source of speculation and a new chapter in the family medical archive. Doctors prescribe rest cures, trips to the seaside, and soothing tonics with a healthy splash of brandy. You spend hours in consultation with beauty manuals, searching for the secret that will undo decades of perfectly reasonable self-sabotage. Yet, somehow, you survive. Bent, brittle, and perhaps a little more suspicious of mirrors, but still standing. You pass on your stories, your accessories, and your hard-won knowledge to the next generation. Don't trust the arsenic. Beware of shoes that fit, and never, ever let anyone see you slouch. So here you are, a survivor of the Victorian beauty gauntlet, living proof that resilience is just another word for still here, despite everything. And as you drift off to sleep, you might wonder, was it all worth it? Or will you wake up tomorrow, ready to do it all again, just to look almost perfect, at least until breakfast? Shopping for your complexion is a real adventure. The Victorian Apothecary is stocked with all the greatest hits: arsenic wafers for that fashionable pallor, belladonna eye drops to dilate your pupils until you look permanently surprised, and chalk dust to really lock in that spectral apparition finish. Because nothing says dateable like a beauty regimen that could kill you before your next social season. Let's take a stroll through the most dangerous beauty aisle in history. You open the creaky door to the local chemist, greeted by shelves crowded with glass bottles, mysterious powders, and labels promising everything except long-term survival. The smell is equal parts rosewater, vinegar, and barely concealed doom. Victorian beauty products aren't just high risk, they're basically a dare. First up, arsenic wafers. Sold in elegant little tins, these tablets promise a perfectly pale, smooth complexion, the look of someone who has never seen the sun, a vegetable, or a sincere compliment. The instructions are charmingly vague. Take sparingly for the finest results, says the label, conveniently omitting, and if you start feeling tingling or seeing double, please consult the local undertaker. Society ladies slip one under their tongue at breakfast, risking everything from nausea to sudden fainting, all in pursuit of that softly luminous, nearly translucent skin tone. After all, if you're not a little bit see-through, are you even fashionable? Next on the shelf, belladonna eye drops. For those seeking that wide-eyed, romantic look, somewhere between startled faun and sleep-deprived poet, belladonna is the answer. One drop, and your pupils expand dramatically, making you look dreamy, mysterious, and just a little bit unhinged. Side effects include blurry vision, light sensitivity, and the lingering fear that you might accidentally mistake your own footman for a suitor in dim lighting. But beauty demands sacrifices, And nothing says sensitive soul like bumping into the furniture all afternoon. Of course, you can't complete your routine without a healthy dusting of chalk powder. Forget bronzer. In Victorian England, the goal is to resemble a marble statue come to life, minus the mobility and plus a risk of respiratory illness. You brush chalk across your cheeks, nose and forehead, ignoring the fact that you're slowly suffocating your pores. If you want to get creative, a splash of vinegar helps the powder set, leaving your face matte, monochrome, and ready to be immortalized in a sepia photograph. The best part? These products are all over-the-counter. No doctor's note, no questions asked. Just step right up and treat yourself to a future filled with chemical burns, fainting spells, and a growing collection of half-used bottles in your medicine chest. The apothecary will even throw in some extra advice. A little mercury for those troublesome spots, or perhaps some lead powder for stubborn redness. You politely decline and make a note to write your will, just in case. And it's not just women. Men are lured by the promise of gentlemen's hair tonics, usually a heady mix of alcohol, lead, and desperation. If you notice your eyebrows thinning or your sideburns changing color, that's just proof the product is working. Still, the social rewards are undeniable. At every gathering, pale faces glow in the candlelight, pupils shine with unnatural brilliance, and not a single freckle dares show itself unpowdered. Compliments are traded, mostly in whispers. "How luminous you look, my dear, almost ethereal." "Why, thank you. I've only had 2 nosebleeds today." So you continue the ritual, dabbing, swallowing, and blinking through your side effects, determined to stay at the cutting edge of mortal danger and style. Because in Victorian England, the price of beauty isn't just money, it's survival. And really, what could be more romantic than risking everything for the perfect ghostly glow? Wide hips are all the rage, and if you weren't born with them, no problem. Just strap on a set of side paddings so big you need an assistant to fit through a doorway. Victorian skirt technology means sitting requires trigonometry, spatial awareness, and a willingness to get stuck sideways at least once a week. Bonus points if you knock over a priceless vase and keep a straight face. In the great pageant of Victorian beauty, there is no such thing as too much. If nature didn't endow you with impressively broad hips, Victorian fashion designers were more than happy to provide a solution, preferably one that could double as emergency flotation in the event of flooding. Enter the era of bustles, panniers, and hip pads, wearable architecture, equal parts science experiment and slapstick comedy. The day begins with a ritual assembly of your undercarriage. You step into a basic petticoat, then start layering on crinoline and padding, side by side, row by row. Each hip receives its own miniature pillow, meticulously tied, buttoned, and sometimes laced for good measure. The final effect: hips so wide you could balance a tea tray, or possibly serve as an extra chair at crowded gatherings. Admiring yourself in the mirror, you have a fleeting moment of pride before the first attempt to move reminds you that physics is not on your side. Every doorway is a test. The secret is to approach at an angle, turn just so, and hope that the padding compresses enough to let you through without dragging the wallpaper with you. Hallways become obstacle courses. Sitting down is the ultimate challenge. You must gauge the trajectory, account for skirt expansion, and gently lower yourself into the exact center of the chair, or risk a slow-motion toppling that ends with a dignified thud and several apologies to the nearest plant. Public events provide their own hazards. At tea, you try to slide gracefully into your seat, only to find your bustle wedged between the chair arms like a ship in a particularly bad harbour. At the theatre, you occupy 2 seats and most of the aisle. Getting up again is its own performance, every movement requiring both muscle memory and hope as you wriggle, lever, and occasionally accept the assistance of a helpful footman or an enterprising cousin. Victorian skirt technology is always evolving. Some years, bustles are soft and cloud-like, easy to compress but impossible to keep in place. Other years, they're constructed with springs, hoops, and a level of engineering last seen in bridge building. If you're lucky, your bustle merely squeaks as you move. If you're not, it produces an alarming metallic boing, alerting everyone in the drawing room that you have, once again, attempted to sit down too quickly. Then there's the constant threat to the household decor. One wrong turn and you've swept a vase off the mantel or tangled your side padding in a potted fern. Parties become competitive. Who can avoid knocking over a chair? Who can pirouette through a door without getting stuck? The real experts can sit, stand, and even dance in their padded splendor, all while pretending not to notice the chaos they leave in their wake. Men are not entirely immune to the hip craze, though their padding is more discreet and less likely to take out a tea trolley. Still, everyone is in awe of a well-padded silhouette, a sign of status, wealth, and the ability to endure minor indoor collisions with grace. At the end of the day, you peel off your padding and experience a brief sensation of weightlessness, your hips returning to their usual proportions, your sense of spatial awareness temporarily restored. You glance at the battered furniture, the dented vases, and the trail of displaced household objects, and know you've survived another round of Victorian beauty engineering. Because in this era, every day is a contact sport, and a well-padded hip is worth its weight in slapstick glory. The beauty regime starts young. Children are molded, pinched, and trussed into the latest fashions from the moment they can walk. Tiny corsets, miniature crinolines, and a stern governess with a ruler ensure you never slouch, smile too widely, or heaven forbid, get dirty. Childhood is less playtime, more pre-season training for the adult misery Olympics. In Victorian England, children aren't just adorable accessories for family portraits. They are living, breathing projects in progress, blank canvases upon which ambitious parents and relentless governesses unleash every beauty standard, etiquette rule, and tragic hairstyle the era can devise. If you were hoping for tree climbing and muddy knees, think again. The only thing climbing here is the expectation that you look presentable at every hour, under all circumstances, even if you're 4 and your only hobby is losing hats. Your morning begins not with cartoons and toast, but with a stern wake-up call and an inspection. The governess hovers, armed with a tape measure and a frown, ready to check for posture, cleanliness, and the state of your hair ribbons. Any whiff of bedhead is attacked with a damp comb and the kind of discipline usually reserved for naval training. If your shirt isn't tucked or your boots aren't polished, expect a lesson in personal shame and a story about a cousin who ended up in trade. Then comes the dressing ritual, which is less getting ready and more putting on a parade uniform. Boys are buttoned into stiff collars, waistcoats, and sailor suits so crisp you could cut yourself on the pleats. Girls face an even greater ordeal: starched pinafores, frilly bloomers, and, of course, a child-sized corset to ensure you never develop dangerous ideas about breathing deeply. Add in a miniature crinoline or petticoat, and you're ready for the playground, assuming the playground is made of velvet cushions and the only acceptable activity is sitting up straight. Lessons in deportment begin before breakfast. Sit up, shoulders back, elbows in. Walk as if you have a book on your head. Bonus points if you actually do. If you forget, the governess's ruler taps out a rhythm of discipline, turning even the most energetic child into a model of upright, wide-eyed endurance. Smiling is allowed, but only a small controlled smile, no giggles, no snorts, and absolutely no showing of teeth which may or may not be all there. Physical activity is tightly supervised. Running is unladylike. Rolling in the grass is common. Climbing trees is grounds for social exile, or at least an extra hour of sitting on a hard bench, reflecting on your choices. If you do fall or get dirty, your governess whisks you away for a hasty clean-up and a lecture about disgrace. Remember, the Queen herself might pass by at any moment. The only safe hobbies are needlepoint, reciting poetry, and, if you're very lucky, playing a few bars of an approved piano sonata. The beauty standards don't end with clothes and posture. Girls are coached in the art of fainting gracefully, in case a stray corset string demands it. Boys are taught to tip their hats with solemn precision and to never, under any circumstances, let their hair fall into their eyes. If you wear spectacles, you'll be fitted with frames so round and tiny they double as a personality test. If you can still see, you must not be reading enough Latin. Childhood ailments are dealt with by an array of equally Victorian remedies. Spots are dabbed with vinegar, freckles with lemon juice, and every sniffle is met with a vapour bath, or, for special occasions, a dose of cod liver oil. Comfort is not a priority. Character is. By the end of the day, you're a small but mighty paragon of good manners, aching joints, and perfectly parted hair. You collapse into bed, already dreaming of a time when you can dress yourself. And maybe, just maybe, sneak in a smile wider than 3 millimeters. Because in Victorian England, childhood isn't about freedom. It's basic training for a lifetime of beautiful suffering. Not even men escape the tyranny. Fashionable gents starch their collars until they risk beheading themselves with a sneeze, wax their moustaches into mathematically improbable shapes, and bravely balance bowler hats atop their heads. Despite the constant threat of hat, theft, wind, or existential doubt about why they need to wear 3 layers of wool in August. In Victorian England, a gentleman's wardrobe is as much an endurance trial as it is a statement of social status. Each morning, the act of dressing is a battle waged with starched linen, stubborn buttons, and wool so thick it could double as home insulation. Comfort is nowhere in sight. Style is all. Even your own tailor seems to hate you, judging by the severity of your trousers' creases. Start with the shirt. White, stiff, and tucked with military precision. Next, the collar. No mere flap of fabric. This is an upright monument to discipline, drenched in enough starch to stop a charging bull. Wear it right, and you exude respectability. Wear it wrong, and you'll find yourself lightly garroted before breakfast. Every movement is an exercise in caution. Swivel your head too quickly, and you risk slicing your own jugular, Victorian style. Neckties and cravats are next. There are manuals, diagrams, and entire magazine columns dedicated to their proper knotting. A true dandy can tie 12 different knots before breakfast, and each has a distinct meaning, provided anyone can remember what they are. The tie must be straight, the bow perfect, the knot so tight it could support a suspension bridge. If you feel your vision dimming, that's just the price of elegance. Layer on the waistcoat, cut to emphasize both your slender waist and your inability to breathe deeply. Then comes the jacket, tailored, buttoned, and weighted for maximum gravitas. No matter the season, wool is the fabric of choice. 3 layers in July, a test of both manliness and basic survival instincts. If you sweat, do it discreetly. If you faint, try to land somewhere dignified, ideally near a potted fern or a helpful valet. No look is complete without trousers, creased and cuffed within an inch of their lives. The fit must be precise. Too loose and you're mistaken for a poet. Too tight and you'll be composing sonnets about personal discomfort. Shoes are polished until you can see your soul reflected, usually hovering between resignation and quiet despair. And then, the moustache. A symbol of virility, authority, and a certain disregard for soup. Victorian men don't just grow facial hair, they sculpt it, train it, and attack it with wax each morning, coaxing it into curls, points, or even elaborate handlebar formations. If your moustache droops, it's an omen of personal and professional decline. More than one romance has been ruined by a poorly timed sneeze and a collapsing wax masterpiece. Finally, the crowning touch. The bowler hat. The most mysterious accessory of all. Why is it round? Why does it never fit quite right? Why is every gust of wind a threat to both your dignity and your millinery investment? No one knows. But every man must have one. Wearing your hat at the correct angle is a subtle code, signaling everything from confidence to imminent existential crisis. Lose your hat in public. and you'll be spending the afternoon concocting elaborate stories about robbery by rogue Gus. Men's accessories do not stop there. A gentleman must be armed with a pocket watch, always checked, never admired, a cane, for style, not support, and gloves, because everyone's hands are a source of secret shame. Each item is chosen to project an air of effortless superiority, never mind the hours spent cleaning, polishing, and perfecting the effect. So you dress, layer by layer, wax and button and buckle, and stride out into the world, upright, uncomfortable, and ready to endure whatever the day brings. Because in Victorian England, fashion is suffering, and no one suffers more stylishly than a man in a starched collar and a bowler hat 2 sizes too small. So, you made it. You survived a day, or at least an evening, trapped in the corseted, powdered, faint-inducing world of Victorian beauty. Your ribs have been squeezed, your eyebrows erased, your face has bravely survived its daily brush with arsenic, and you've dodged at least 2 open flames in the name of good hair. Your feet may never forgive you for the boots, and your digestive system is quietly filing a complaint after that breakfast of dry toast and existential dread. But hey, against all odds, you endured. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that people will go to truly ridiculous lengths just to look good for each other. Whether it's plucking out your eyebrows by candlelight, risking fainting spells just to fit into a dress, or mastering the death-defying art of sitting down in a crinoline, Victorians never backed down from a challenge, no matter how absurd. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your very un-Victorian, delightfully soft bed, maybe with elastic waistbands and central heating, spare a gentle thought for all those who came before you. The ones who survived fashion trends that would make a dermatologist weep and a chiropractor retire early. Maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your ancestors who made it through the lead-based creams, the chalk toothpaste, and the kind of hairpins that doubled as medieval weaponry. Because history is more than just suffering. It's also about resilience, hope, and a stubborn refusal to let common sense get in the way of a good look. Every impossible beauty trend, every uncomfortable shoe, every questionable face powder is a reminder that humans are nothing if not creative and just a little bit absurd. So rest easy. Let the worries of corsets and cold cream drift away. You've made it to the present, where beauty is a little kinder, beds are a lot softer, and nobody is judging your eyebrows in the dark. Good night, and sleep well.